Welcome, everyone. I'm excited to bring you to this episode of the Sunflower Podcast, a podcast exploring all aspects of children's palliative care around the world. Sunflower Podcast is going to bring curiosity, humor, and reflection to the world of palliative care. We're going to explore the joys and challenges of working in this incredible field, including topics related to education, advocacy, self-care, service provision, and leadership from around the world. Whether you're a nurse, counselor, pharmacist, doctor, or other type of health worker, or just someone who's interested in learning more about children's palliative care, then this is the podcast for you. I am one of your hosts. My name is Camara Van Breemen, and I work at Canuck Children's Hospice. This is a palliative care program in Vancouver, Canada. So let's get started. I wanted to introduce Sarah Ho. She's a bereaved mom who experienced the holistic approach of pediatric palliative care almost 15 years ago. Sarah is here to talk about her and her family's experience, the initial introduction to pediatric palliative care in the ICU where her son Mitchell was, their time in a pediatric hospice, and of course, the ongoing journey of grief. Hi, Sarah, and welcome to the podcast.
Good morning.
So let's begin with Mitch. Love to hear about him.
Thank you. And thank you for having me here today. I and my husband, together we had 3 beautiful children, 2 boys and a girl. Mitchell was our middle child, and he was our busiest child. We had him enrolled in just about anything and everything that he could just take life and grab it and go. But at the age of 3, Mitch had a reaction to an antibiotic, which put him into some heart failure. It was a very strange reaction, which left him with a cardiomyopathy that we just largely had to treat heavily on cardiac support medications. So for 8 years, he continued in that realm.
And he was busy, wasn't he?
He was very busy. Yeah.
So Mitch lived with a serious illness,
Mm-hmm.
and yet on the outside, he was doing everything his peers were doing.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So tell me about the day everything changed.
Okay, so as I said, we were living our best lives until the 15th of April, 2008. And I got a phone call to say Mitchell had had an accident in the playground at recess and had been taken to BC Children's Hospital. So you can well imagine the surprise when I got into the hospital and found him in the trauma room and realized that it had been something far more than a playground accident. In fact, he'd had an arrhythmia that rendered him unconscious, and he was not resuscitated for quite some time and had a resulting hypoxic brain injury that we were facing.
So up to the ICU?
Into the ICU, and spent 5 days there just really doing all the tests to make sure that, there wasn't anything recoverable, and understanding that we were going to be transitioning then into end of life.
I think it's good to mention that both you and your husband are in healthcare.
We are. I have a nursing background, and my husband is a radiologist.
Yeah.
So hospitals were quite comfortable places for us.
And in that time, you were introduced to the concept of pediatric palliative care, and you met some of the specialists that came and visited.
Yes, we did. We were very gently approached at the bedside and introduced to the concept of palliative care. Canuck Children's Hospice. And being both medical, Stephen and I were very much, no, we're fine. We know the ICU. This is our comfort zone. We don't need that. We're happy with all these monitors. We have we have more control here. We felt we had a sense of control over the situation, just being able to monitor him.
What changed in your perception of what palliative care could bring?
Well, it was a wonderful, gentle approach from the hospice staff, who just sort of revisited us every day, and they encouraged us to just come for a tour of the house. And through gentle conversation, we actually realized that while it served Stephen and I to be in the hospital, it really wasn't serving our other 2 children, and also that Mitchell hated being in the hospital. And so we recognized that there was a bigger need that we couldn't meet in the ICU.
Mm. So you transferred to the hospice.
We did.
Yeah.
We did.
And what do you remember about those days?
I remember our very first tour there. Stephen and I were invited to have lunch and to share lunch, and we were shocked that we ate in the kitchen with all the staff. We sat next to the fellow in charge of pastoral care and volunteers and doctors and nurses, and right away that appealed to Stephen and I because that was just the camaraderie and the teamwork, and we felt supported from the get-go. Early days, we were just so grateful that Mitchell was so well supported.
Yeah, he had good symptom management.
He looked very comfortable and very happy.
Yeah. And his siblings at the time, what ages were they?
So Spencer was 14 at the time and Marisa was 8 years old. So I had two children who had very different needs and also who had completely different approaches, obviously, to crisis and grief and all that entails.
Yeah. And how much time did you spend here? How did you manage your days, and what did that look like for living here? Because I know you were here for a number of weeks.
Yeah, so we spent 5 weeks living in the hospice here. It was fabulous to watch us. From an outside perspective, I could see us transitioning into understanding that we needed to learn to become a family of 4, although Mitch was still with us on everything we did. Spencer at 14 needed to be out in the backyard shooting basketball hoops. He had endless support from the staff, volunteers, care aides, who would just spend so much time when he needed to be the cool 14-year-old. And I got this. And then at the same time, he could go down to the volcano room in the basement of the hospice, which is that padded room, and he could speak to the 3-year-old inside of him and just get angry and cry and kick and scream at the torment that he was living at the same time. So the hospice allowed him to hold space for everything that he was holding.
And Mitchell's little sister was close by him a lot of the time, wasn't she?
She was very threatened, I think, with being on her own. So she would shadow Spencer a lot, and yet was gently encouraged over that 5 weeks because she found her own support. She was a child who expressed herself creatively. So in the art room, that was very much her happy, quiet space. And they actually, made CDs in the music room together with my sister, and had all sorts of creativity that they could feel their needs were supported as well. Yeah, there was space in the house for all of us to have unconditional support.
So you spent about 5 weeks here, I understand, before Mitchell died. And what was that like for your other kids and for your whole family, and in both spending time with Mitchell, but also having their own time and space?
We had a wonderful opportunity. As a mother, I felt I could only deal with the crisis that I was in with Stephen. And I felt that my kids, I was so grateful that they were supported in the needs that they had. They slowly transitioned into going back to school. And my husband, I even encouraged, go to work for a little bit. Like, let's change this up, because we recognized that we were on Mitchell's journey now, and that only Mitchell was going to tell us when he was nearing his end of life. So it was definitely a time of confusion at some points about what he was doing, and was he going to die, and when. And we were supported in just sitting in the process and taking it day by day.
I really like how you said, it was Mitchell's journey, and yet you had a team of people around you to sort of support the day-to-day living that you had to do and you were doing with your other children, as well as, paying attention to what Mitch needed and spending that really precious time that you didn't know how much you had of it.
Absolutely. And as you say, there was a lot of things we didn't know, but the expertise of the care team provided us opportunities to do memory making, things that we would never have thought of. And we're so, so grateful that we have these beautiful hand molds in various different arrangements of us holding Mitchell's hand on his own, sits on my husband's desk. He can hold his hand every single day. Things like that, which we were so very grateful to have had the opportunity to do.
Yeah. And I think, those things, what we recognize, actually helps in the grief journey.
Absolutely.
Right? That connection pieces, those legacy pieces are helpful. Tell me a little bit about your grief journey and how you've navigated that.
Yeah, well, as you can imagine, it started on the 15th of April, and so Canuck Place embraced us and allowed us to have the opportunity to the unconditional support to feel all the feels. Laughter was fine, crying was fine, kicking and screaming was fine. In the days following Mitchell's passing, the kids were quite surprised that we actually had to leave the house. They didn't want to leave. So I think that speaks volumes as to where they were at with their grief journey and felt support. And it wasn't a place of bad things. And I think, I have so much gratitude around that. We did 2 years of bereavement support, which I think was instrumental in our grief journey.
The kids had time at the grief support groups with kids?
They did. We would come to the house on a Tuesday night, and the parents would go into their group, and the kids would go downstairs into theirs. And it was kept very private. I thought I would be privy to how my kids were doing, but that was on my kids' terms to share with me if they wanted to or not. And I really respect that. In hindsight, I'm very aware now of the importance of them being able to hold on to their own
path. Right?
Their own path.
And speaking of that, what are they doing now?
So Spencer is now 29 years old. He's a kinesiologist and is doing a master's in sports psychology. And our daughter Marisa is in nursing school and has the want to be involved in healthcare and maybe be a nurse practitioner. And they're definitely health and wellness oriented. And I have to say that they are the most beautiful communicators because of their very early life experience with grief, but primarily because of the support that Canuck Place and the tools that we were given.
And you, what has your journey brought? I think it's all linked into your experience and your love for Mitch. So what's going on for you now?
Absolutely. In the years since the bereavement support group, I actually became a volunteer with really wanting to be by the side of other parents who were facing the same journey we were. I'm quite passionate about that. I represent Canuck Place any opportunity I can. So I've been a guest speaker at numerous events. I'm happy to help with articles and that sort of thing. I have done committee work and even worked here in the volunteer department, hiring and training volunteers. Again, something I'm very passionate about. You can't just have anybody come in. It's a very sensitive, delicate place to be. And then most recently in the last year, I've been really excited to be hired on as family faculty, helping with the serious illness conversation guide workshops that hopefully we can talk about again in another episode.
Thank you so much for your time and your wisdom and your sharing. And my final question is, if you had to introduce pediatric palliative care to a family, or if you have advice for us on how to do that, what would be some of the things you would say to a parent who's sort of starting this journey?
It's a very good question. And I think back to my journey, and I think we continue to be grateful for and surprised by is the ongoing and unconditional support that we have felt from pediatric palliative care. Even though Mitchell died 15 years ago, we continue to feel embraced and supported. And I never would have known that in those initial meetings. Clearly just changed our grief journey. It's terrible to be thrust into crisis like that and you don't know which way is up, but to have somebody to hold your hand and say, we'll walk with you is incredible.
Thank you so much.
You're so welcome. Thank you.
So that's the other episode of the Sunflower Podcast. I hope you join us again. Again, my name's Camara Van Breemen, and I was speaking with Sarah Ho. Take care.